Hi, and welcome to one great show of Inspirational Journeys. Having grown up in a nurturing, protected, and loving environment, I couldn't imagine a childhood any other way. My father, who was forced to grow into an adult at an early age, was courageous enough to share with his daughters the not-so-picture-perfect experiences he lived in the Bronx in the 1960s, and that made him the tough man he was. He wanted us to know about the realities of life, not those depicted in a fairy tale-like cartoons, but the ones lived on the streets and affecting the Latino communities. My father had the need to remind us how others didn't have it so great and how the world at times was cruel and unforgiving. He told us about stories of violence, abandonment, poverty, and misery. His intent? Instill in us a sense of gratefulness and toughen our spirits to prepare us to the world out there. It is then that I had my first glimpse into the lives of people that weren't as blessed as I was. No wonder I naively thought to have heard it all under the sun, an idea so far-fetched from the truth. When I listen, I have a secret to share with you. I have a superpower. I can walk through fire. I had no idea of the story I was about to hear. In fact, I had no idea I would meet a woman with a remarkable power, worth describing as being able to walk over fire and survive. Her story would mark the beginning of my own journey, my journey of discovering what rising up from our pain looks like. I was able to put a face to remarkable transformation, what it looks like. Her name is Dr. Bridget Cooper, Dr. B, as she wants us to call her. Dr. B experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, and in several instances tampered with the idea of taking her own life. Dr. B's extraordinary story, full of horror and hope, offers a proven path to move away from darkness. She has managed to choose a life over death. She claimed her power. She became the person she wanted to be. She's been successful at reshaping her footing and creating a new landscape for survival. She's been helping others claim their power and live gracefully beyond pain. She's a voice among the silent and the exemplary spirit behind many won battles. I invite you into her remarkable story.
I have a secret to share with you. I have a superpower, and I'm going to share it with you today. Do you want to know what it is? I can walk through fire.
Welcome to another Car Conversations with Dr. B, because I'm in my car and I'm Dr. B. So that's how I roll.
Dr. B.
Hey.
Thank you so much.
That was so
for
great.
being
Oh my
here
God,
with us.
thank you for having me. That was so great. I got to watch that intro.
It is an honor to have you here at Inspirational Journeys.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing your story. I know many of the people watching are going to be inspired.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, the tough question.
Yeah.
How was your childhood, and when did the domestic violence and the sexual assault begin?
Whew. So the how my childhood was is a very complicated question because I think in some of the most, you talked about it as horror and hope. I think you can see unimaginable pain and also have amazing times. So I had a very mixed childhood, but to answer your question specifically, when did the domestic violence begin? As I say in my TEDx talk, the first time that my mother saw my father beat me, I was 8 weeks old. And from that, I was brought into an environment where there was already pre-existing domestic violence, where my father was beating and raping my mother. And so to be a child brought into that environment, I saw it and then I experienced it very quickly. I think when you're in such a toxic space, there are no boundaries to begin with, so there were really no boundaries to protect me. And the sexual assault by my father started sometime in my early infant to toddler time. I don't have a specific memory of it. I was told the stories by my mother, and they were indicated by bodily scarring that proved the abuse. So it was very early on. And again, not surprising given the context that, I had been brought into. Yeah.
I was reading your recent book, Little Landslides, talks about your story, and you talk about your father and your mother, and I was wondering, did your mother protect you?
No. I wish I didn't have such a quick response to that. I think that she was incapable of protecting herself. And so I think the idea of having someone who was depending on her be protected, I don't know that she understood what that meant and how to really orchestrate that. I think that she had times of trying. And I also think that her relationship with my dad was so incredibly toxic, and she was mentally ill. And so she was in such a broken place herself that I don't think she could take an empowered position to be able to really protect me from anything. So, there were times, when she left him, I guess there was that form of removal, but then she sent me back to him to visit with him. So it's really hard to kind of reconcile how that protection looked from her viewpoint.
Because you talk in the story, you spend time with your father until the age of 5?
Yeah, it was about, I was 3.5 the last time that I visited with him alone. And then after that, he came to see my mom and I a couple of times, and I went to see him very briefly a couple of more times. We only saw each other a handful of times after I turned 3.5-ish, 4. When I was 4, we moved cross country from California to Massachusetts, and so there wasn't as much access at that point. Yeah.
And were there any family members, anyone in the family that observed the abuse and tried to help or became a support system for you?
It's a really great question. I've had conversations. My parents were fairly isolated from their family systems. My father, they just had a very unhealthy family relationship, and my mother, because she chose my father. So my grandparents and extended family didn't have much respect for my mother's choices. So they were fairly isolated. I have spoken with my father's brother and my mother's sister, who are my two closest family members, just emotion-wise. And they've both, shared their apologies for not having done more. My uncle was very aware and witnessed the abuse between my mother and my father, not me, or not that he has said. And my aunt knew something was wrong because of the way that I behaved when I would visit with her. I was a very clingy, emotionally vulnerable child. And so she knew something was happening. She knew my mother was unwell, but she had no idea, I think, the depths of depravity that were happening in that household. And she actually came to me after she read Little Landslides, and because this is her little sister that I'm talking about, right?
Sure.
And my mother was deceased at the time, so I apologized in advance. Like, I hope this book doesn't hurt you, knowing that you have, such deep feelings about your sister. And she came back and said to me, I know who my sister was, and you treated her very fairly. And she said that she wanted to apologize for wishing she had done something. And my first response really was to jump in and say, oh, no, it's okay, it's okay. And then I thought, no, because I think that's the point, is that, not that I'm angry with her, because I'm not, and not that I don't forgive any of that, because I do, but I also recognize that if we don't stand for those who don't have the voice, who don't have power, then we really are being harmful. Like, we need to be just unequivocally non-bystanders. We need to step in for people who need us to step in for them. So, yeah, we had that conversation. So to answer your question, not really. There weren't people who were seeing it and trying to step in any real way.
And you mentioned about how the pain showed through you and how it manifested.
Right.
Can you share with us how do you feel it indeed showed to the world how you were feeling?
I think it's interesting. I've talked with a number of people who knew me throughout the years, because we moved a lot. I moved 5 times before I was 4, and then I moved. I had 4 different elementary schools. So I didn't have a lot of consistent contact with a lot of people, but there were some people that I knew for a long, long time. And I think they had some idea of what was going on, but then others had no idea. So it's interesting. They talk about domestic violence as hiding in plain sight. A lot of people are hiding in plain sight. And I think that was really true for me. I think that I, in some ways, overcompensated with my, whether it was friendliness, whether it was energy level, perkiness, trying to rise above whatever was kind of drawing on me. And so I know that I was probably quick to tears. I was very sensitive. I think I probably attached to people in ways that, if a psychologist were watching, would probably know was not a healthy way to do it. And I think it was in my teen years when I started having more depressive-like symptoms that were coming up. I think then it became probably more apparent to those outside that something was wrong.
Something was wrong.
Yeah.
In your childhood, did you ever tell anyone?
No, I don't think that I ever told anyone directly until I was probably 10 or 11. I may have said something that might have indicated to a psychologist that something was up, but then I think I quickly hid from it. I think there's especially when it started so early that. And I had been raised to believe that everything that happens in our lives, we ask for. So one of the things that my mom used to say to me at a very young age was that you chose me to be your mother. You chose this life. So if you are unhappy with it, you should ask yourself why you made that choice. So to tell someone that those things were happening didn't seem like... it just seemed like I would get more responsibility, not really assistance.
Exactly.
So, and I also think that when you grow accustomed to something, you talk about putting a frog in boiling water, the frog will jump out. But if you slowly boil the water, the frog will stay until it dies.
Sure.
And I think for a lot of people who have had abuse in their histories, they just stay in the water.
Did you ever feel that, and probably this is hopefully, not a bad question, but did you ever feel that you didn't belong to your family?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways I felt like I didn't fit into that structure. I think one of the things that I remarked about years later was that rage saved me and forgiveness redeemed me. And I got very angry with my family starting around age 10 or 11. I started really seeing very clearly some of their failings, my mother's addictions and propensity to pick bad men, and just all sorts of her mental illness and her suicidal ideation and all of those things. And I started getting really angry about them, and no one else seemed to be stepping in and saying, yeah, that's right, get mad. They were turning it back on me. And so, yeah, I didn't feel like I fit at all because of just how I saw things and the truth that I was trying to uncover. I didn't really fit into the system that was there.
When did things change? When were you able to break through the cycle?
That's a really great question too. I tell people, and I talk about it in little landslides, why I picked the container of events that I picked was because when I was 18, I was back at college, and I was finally coming to terms with the fact through just conversations with friends, and I think an intensity of my depression and anxiety that I needed help. Like this was either going to go really badly, or it was going to fix itself. And so I reached out for help, and in that reaching out for help, I became hyper aware that if I didn't get my father out of my life once and for all, I wouldn't survive it, because I was so closely connected to him in such unhealthy ways based on our relationship path, and that if I didn't break free of that, I would never be able to handle the reconciliation and the grieving of all the things that had happened, and to craft a new narrative about myself. So in saying goodbye to him, I opened up the door to a very different life. But there was no magic bullet. It wasn't like, at 18 I started with this therapist and I said goodbye to dad, and then all of a sudden everything was great.
It's not an on and off switch.
No, there was I talk about with people about recovery as being like a spiral staircase, that you get further and further from what happened, but you can still see it. You can still see it pretty clearly for a good long time. You get a little further, but it's still there. And I think it took a long time for me to really incorporate all of those experiences in much more healthy ways. And I have no question that there will be times in the future that I'll say, oh, I've actually thought of another way that I need to think about this, and now I can heal even more. I think it's a lifelong journey when we've been hit hard. Yeah.
Did you forgive your father?
Yeah. I saw him, and I see him as such a broken person who really had no idea how to manage any of the intense emotions that he was having about growing up, about connecting with my mom, about being responsible for a child. I mean, he was 21 when I was born, and he had come from a very unhealthy background, and he had his own demons. And I understand that the actions that he took, as wrong as they were, had nothing to do with me. They had everything to do with how he externalized his own pain, which is why I do what I do now, is to help people not have that level of pain, because when you have that, you're either going to eat it and do horrible things to yourself and or hurt other people with it. So it just became my life journey to be able to alleviate some of that, so that there are fewer of my parents and me kind of floating out there.
Remarkable.
Hey, thanks.
Is there anything in specific moment or experience that was the responsible for the change?
I think it was, for me, the rock bottom. In college, that term when I went out and I contacted that therapist that I started with, and I saw her for a couple of years until I graduated, and we had to explore the depths of things that I had been kind of putting into a corner for a long time. It was precipitated by me figuring out, and I write about it in the book, how was I going to kill myself effectively this time? Because I had tried a number of times before, and I was standing there in my dorm room trying to figure out how I could end it. And in those moments of thinking how I could end it and not being able to figure out the right way and what would hurt other people and it would be messy or would it be effective, and I'm going through all these machinations, in my head, I think there was just this person inside of me screaming out, this is not about you. Like, you need to get angry. Mm-hmm. And it was in that anger and that rage about what had happened that I took my power back.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone help you?
Well, my therapist, and I actually sent her a copy of this book. I tracked her down. She's living up in Vermont now, and I think she was tickled to hear from me. But I wrote about her in the book because I remember sitting with her and telling her my story, and just the look of devastation on her face. Like, she was so hurt by the story that I started to recognize what I had been through and the reality of it. And she gave me hope that I would be able to see the other side. And I remember one of her comments, I said, I can't wait someday. I'm going to be able to help people because I've been through this. And she looked at me and she was like, what are you talking about? Like, that is not this is nothing to be grateful about. And I said, no, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful this happened. And I think she couldn't wrap her head around, an 18-year-old sitting in front of her, telling her the stories I was telling her and saying how grateful I was for the pain.
You mentioned it on Little Landslides. And, I had to read through it twice.
Yeah.
To grasp the idea, and then I understood fully what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And is it your journey? How has influenced who you are now?
Oh, it's everything about me. I mean, I think that's for all of us. Our journey, brings us to where we are, and hopefully we do good things with it. It has given me a passion for helping people tap into their power and tap into their power so that they can live fully in it, so that they aren't giving it away. And they aren't trying to take it from other people. Because had power been in balance in my house, none of that would have happened. The domestic violence would have happened, all of that, because everyone would have been standing in their own peace and their own power. But because of all of the power dynamics being what they were, no one was able to kind of hold on to that. So it's really given me a path to follow, to be able to help other people so that, again, less pain.
And you're doing a great job.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate that.
And you are a mother of 2 daughters.
I am.
You are. And
teenage, almost 18. Oh my God, 2 weeks. In less than 2 weeks, she'll be 18. Yeah.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Now, how would you say that the journey has shaped the mother you are?
Oh, you're good. She's good at these questions. It made me actually afraid to be a mom. Based on the experiences that I had, I was afraid that I would not be the best of what my mother was, and be not only the worst of what she was, but the worst of what I could potentially be, given the damage that was done to me. And at the same time, I couldn't wait to try to do it better. So I had these very juxtaposed experiences of that. But how it's influenced my mothering at this point is, throughout the journey, is that I'm very clear about empowering my children to have a voice, sometimes to my own detriment, because they have a voice. But I wanted them to be able to speak for themselves, to be able to honor their truth, to be able to stand up to bullies, to be able to see what people in pain do, so that they could see them as in pain versus see them as themselves as being responsible for someone else's pain. Because I think that's where so much of my pain came from, was seeing what other people did to me as something that I needed to fix or I needed to somehow take on. And so I've been really tried to be so clear, and I've not been perfect, but tried to be so clear about boundaries for them, and to see that in their lives in a really clear way, and to really just raise 2 fierce women. I want them to be fierce and loving, but fierce.
Yes, you talk in your book a lot about forgiveness and boundaries, and how to establish those right relationships, and walk away when you have to walk away.
Absolutely.
From a relationship that is no good and is influencing you in a bad manner.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how do you help people? How do you create the platform? Is it a one-on-one step? Is it, How
There's
is
so
your
many
style?
different ways. There's so many different ways. So, you know, a lot of people read my books and or watch videos, and they grab little pieces, or it helps them shift some of the ways they were thinking about things, or open up their hearts, or something. And that's one vehicle. A lot of people come to me one-on-one coaching, and we go through a lot of their. I've had so many clients come to me who didn't realize that they were coming to me for forgiveness work, but that's what they were coming to me for. And when it comes up, they're like, I would have avoided that like the plague if I'd known that that's where we were going to go with this. But, you know, so I work on them with that. And I also do a lot of workshops and keynotes and seminars and retreat work. So I work with groups also in trying to help them figure out, you know, again, where their power is, and to be able to stand firmly in it in the world. And that comes out in communication. It comes out in feelings of empowerment and change process, you know, whatever it may be.
And what would be your one advice to someone struggling with something really difficult in their lives?
To remember who they were put here to be, and that whatever it is that is standing in their way, you know, I talk in my talk about being able to walk through fire, that every last one of us can walk through fire if we walk through it quickly and purposefully enough.
Great. What's next?
Oh gosh, what's next? World takeover? No. So graduating my daughter, and I think just putting more and more of myself into the world in whatever ways that seems to come up. Yeah, I mean, I think I get invited to do the things I'm supposed to do when I'm supposed to do them.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with you,
reach out. Yeah, they can email me at Bridget at drbridgetcooper.com. They can friend me on Facebook, Bridget Cooper or Dr. B. Same with LinkedIn. And go to my website and, you know, check me out on YouTube. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bridget, for being here. Your journey is remarkable. I recommend everyone to read your Little Landslides book. It's very empowering, as you said. And it helps us to rise over our own pains that, you know, might be different, but there's still pain. And, you know, we can definitely find on this book a journey, a guide to healing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Honor your stories, embrace your pain, attend to your wounds, then take back your power. What power? Your bold, loving, grateful power. The power to define yourself however you choose. The power to bring you in the world in the ways only you can. To show up for this life with joy, even in the face of sorrow. All that matters in this life is your experience of it and the legacy you leave behind. And I want to share also a very interesting story that Dr. B shared with us. And it says, one evening an old Cherokee Indian told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, my son, the battle is between two wolves inside us all. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which wolf wins? The old Cherokee simply replied, the one you feed. Well, leaving you with this thought in mind, and see you on our next show of Inspirational Journeys. Thank you so much for watching us.